Thank you for being here this evening. My name is Carla, and I am the Director of Training for the T.A.P project, and I'm excited today to have this discussion with these three gentlemen as we are going to talk about life after football. And this talk tonight is funded by Barclays Football, so thank you for them for making this happen. So we're going to jump right in, and I'd like to introduce our three panelists. Starting to my far left is Hope Akpan. Hope, 1 minute. And then we have Mr. Aaron Burns and Ref Evans. And each of these gentlemen are former pro football players, and they're going to share some of their journey with us this evening and tell us about the ups, the downs, how they've been impacted by their journey, some things they may do different. So just enjoy this conversation with us. So I'll start with you, Hope. Hope, what was your journey into pro football?
My journey into pro football started very early. I was picked up by Everton Academy at 7, 8 years old, and I stayed there for 10 years until I was 19. So I was in that academy system from a very young age. Yeah.
And Aaron, you go ahead. So each of you answer that for me, and then we'll go into.
Quite similar to Hope, to be fair. I got scouted by Manchester United at 9, and I left Man United at 21. So yeah, was lucky enough to go all the way through the academy system at United when United were doing really, really well.
My journey into football started at Fletcher Moss. A lot of people know or would have heard of Fletcher Moss. It was one of the leading, I guess, grassroots football clubs. And then I was scouted for City United. Ended up not going on trial, but then I decided to go a couple of years later on trial at Burnley Football Club. I was there till I reached the age of YT, which was 16 to 18, and then I moved to Rochdale, signed for them.
Hope, the academy system, because unless you're into football, and even when you are, some people do not understand how that works. Now, you and both Aaron were there for your whole youth. Did you assume, or was it assumed, that you would go into Premier?
It was definitely part of my thinking that, yeah, I'm at Everton Academy. The route to the first team is there, I can see it. But along the way, we were always told that it's going to be difficult. And out of a squad of 16, they used to tell us, oh, maybe only 2 or 3 of you might make it through. But obviously you have that belief in yourself, and you want to challenge yourself and try and get there. But as well as being in the academy was really fun. You know, we travelled the world. We played all the other teams, Man United, Liverpool. We were in a kind of bubble. We were isolated from the real world in a sense. So it was tough. It was difficult. There was a lot of dedication. You know, many nights spent on the training field. You know, I used to catch a train and a bus to get to training, come back 10 o'clock at times, have school the next day. So there's a lot of dedication applied to it, but at the same time, you know, it was a great childhood and a great environment to grow as a person, as a young man.
Now, Aaron, for you, did you grow up where your family and support system knew about football, and so as you were progressing through the academy system, it was clear that you were going to go pro?
No, there was no real sporting atmosphere in my family at all. I came from a single parent family where my mum had me when she was 16 years old in Moss Side. So when I moved to Wythenshawe and I discovered football at 8, I was quickly at Manchester United, and she had no understanding of football at all. So my development as a player was learning on the job almost, and sometimes I had to educate my parents in regards to what the potential was or what I was aspiring for, but I was in the best place for that because there was clear people in front of me that had walked the path that I'd walked. So aspiration and inspiration was there, but ultimately we was learning on the job in regards to what the potential was.
Did you ever feel pressure?
No, not from home. The pressure was only the pressure that I would put on myself. And I think that's what ultimately you need to be an elite athlete. You have to put an element of pressure on yourself. So the pressure came from me wanting to be successful. It never came from any individual in my household. I think as I got a little bit older, 15, 16, and it was, time to leave school, I felt a little bit of pressure then, because people are vicariously living through you. So your friends and your family and your circle want you to make it because it's Manchester United, and you're the person that they've seen grow and develop in that role. So I think as you get a little bit older, the pressure increases, but that's just because people want you to do well and want to live through your vision and your dream ultimately.
Raph, you talked about an opportunity that came for you to go into the academy system, and you did not take it. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Care to share about that?
Yeah, it's a strange one, really, and I think it still kind of haunts me to this day, because similar to, there's some similarities to what both Hope and Aaron are saying, but I think growing up, my parents, etc., they just, football was a hobby. It wasn't something that we took seriously, so we didn't understand the opportunity, and I didn't understand the opportunity that we had in terms of sort of like going on trial at a professional club. It wasn't something that, it's really difficult to describe, but it wasn't something like I knew was a real, what it was at that age, because I'm only, 12, 13, and I remember my coach saying, you don't need to go there. It sounds stupid, now that I'm older it sounds stupid, but it does grate me, because he was like, you don't need to go there, just come here, play every weekend, etc., etc. And when you look back, you realise how silly that is, that you're not going to go and have the same experience that Hope and Aaron had, and travelling around the world and playing football, etc. And I think at the time, like I said, I was only 12 or 13. I wasn't as forthright as I am now in terms of my future, etc. So I kind of let that go. But then when Burnley came in a year or so after, I was adamant that I wanted to go on to trial and give football a go.
Now let's talk about, as an academy player, the sacrifice. Can each of you recall in what way you sacrifice? Because of course with the trainings and driving up and down and all of that, especially those from single parent homes that maybe it's one parent pushing, what do you feel, we'll start with you, Raph, was a sacrifice when you played on a beyond grassroots level?
I think the sacrifices for me probably started around maybe age 15, when I started to realise the importance of the smaller details. So, we pre-season obviously not notorious for the amount of running. Now, one training session, I noticed that I had a curry goat and rice. This is back when I was eating meat at 4 p.m. just after school, and we didn't train till 7. And it was the first time I realised I was at the front of the running. I'm a sprinter, I'm not a marathon person. So then that kind of started really getting me to focus on other parts, and as I grew, and as I got older and got into the game a little bit more, I realised the importance of what to and what not to do. Now that's absolutely not the right meal. I don't think that's a perfect pre-game meal if anyone's going to try it. But that led me to not going out as much. Being a homebody, obviously it's a sacrifice moving from Manchester to Rochdale for 2 years where I was at, and you literally you're in your digs, you're by yourself, you train, you do 2 or 3 sessions a day, and then you come home. For me, I came home on a Saturday and I was back in Rochdale on a Sunday.
So you lived up there in a football type of compound?
Yeah. Generally as a youth team player, you're going to live with another teammate and in specialist digs.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's good to know. I thought because in Manchester, especially if you played for a Manchester club, then you just went back home and then travelled to...
Potentially, but I think at the time the club was keen to sort of have me living in Rochdale, not far from the football ground.
Okay. So Aaron, what about you? What sacrifice do you think when you look back?
When people talk about sacrifices in football, I always think about my mum or my grandma ferrying me to football 4 times a week for 12 years. I'm a parent now. My oldest son's 14. He's in the academy system, and I don't think I realised the sacrifices they made for me until I'm doing it. And it's not hindering, but I'm making sacrifices to get him there on time, and he wants to be on time. And I was massive on timekeeping, so I'd give my mum a hard time if she was late, even if it was traffic. So for me, football was a pleasure. So the sacrifices that we was making because of the education that we got didn't feel like a sacrifice. It just felt like I knew what my journey and my path was, and everybody else hadn't quite worked it out yet. So for me, in the academy system, in the younger days, there was no sacrifices. The sacrifice was what my parents made.
I'm smiling because my son is an academy player, and the one thing that he screams at me about is time. And so when you said it, he gave me the look as if to say, yeah, pay attention, lady. So what about you, Hope?
Yeah, just to add to that, you know, I'm sure you guys know when you see the bus and everybody's waiting for you, you don't want to be that guy, do you? In terms of sacrifice for me, I guess it was, you know, during school when your friends are starting to go out and spend nights in the park, getting up to whatever they're getting up to, and you're having to prepare for a game the next day. So on a Saturday night or a Friday night, you're at home or have to leave early because you know you want to be at your best for the game the next day. That was a little bit difficult where I'm from, Liverpool. They all love to party and go out. So I really had to, you know, make a decision that that's not what I'm going to do because I see my future in this. So the peer pressure was there, but I guess that was a big sacrifice. I had to sort of say, listen, I can see the bigger picture. I know this isn't going to be good for me. I'm going to go this way. And to touch on what the guy said there about family, yeah, I was speaking earlier with yourself. My dad used to run a newsagent, and I remember him closing the shop to take me to training. And it's only now, as a young parent with a young daughter, you really understand like the sacrifice that is made. And at Everton, we used to train 2 or 3 times a week. The training session would be from 6 till 9. So you're fighting through traffic to get there, and you didn't want to be late. So yeah, it was a sacrifice that was made by my parents, and then the sacrifice that I made was just having that discipline and having, you know, that assurance of character that you're not getting drawn to places that you really don't need to be because your focus should be somewhere else.
And let's talk about that, because especially when you hit like 14, 15, your hormones kick in, you want to, like you said, be with your friends. Give some insight on what that was like in the sense of you just want to be a regular teenager. You want to do teenage things, but you know that it could perhaps hinder your football. Did you ever, any of you ever say, you know what, I would rather just be at a party?
100%. I think in your sort of early school years, it's cool, you're the football guy. So people sort of, you know, you have friends who appreciate what you do. But then as you get older into the later teens, people have got a bit more freedom. You know, they're going to parties, they're doing whatever they want to do, and you can't do that. So you're not looked at as the cool guy anymore, you know, because you're going early or not coming at all. So to sort of deal with that, you know, you have to have the bigger picture in mind and really zone in on yourself and what you actually want for yourself, because it's very easy to get dragged into those situations and think, oh, it's just one time, or you think you're missing out. The fear of missing out, especially as a teenager, is quite strong. So I guess it's just that discipline and that inner sort of, foresight of this is the direction I want to go, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to be. Does this represent that? If that's a no, then you try and just stay clear of it. And any sort of friend who's trying to drag you away from that isn't really a friend. That's what I'd say.
I echo everything that Hope says. For me, in the early stages, my discipline was really high because it was a privilege and to play for Manchester United, and I really felt that. I think where probably I fell foul was that my discipline had been so high up until 18, 19, where you've got potentially more money than anybody else in your family, and those distractions start to come into play. People are offering you nights out or whatever to go and have fun, and I think that's where I wavered a little bit, and if I'm being dead honest. And you go once and you have a drink and you think, well, I've got training tomorrow, so I'll just have one or two, and you train quite well, and then you all of a sudden, because we're so ritualistic in terms of superstitions, you think that you can do that most weeks or every now and again. It's not going to affect you, but ultimately it catches up on you, and the people that you've outworked in the 9 or 10 years start to catch you up because now you've let your discipline slip a little bit. So it's really important to understand that it's going to be a long journey, and you're going to have to make some really tough decisions along the way. You do have to enjoy yourself, but it's about, to be a professional and a top professional, it's about enjoying yourself at the right times, but doing the basics really, really well. So I think I fell foul of that a little bit at 18, 19, 20, and there's people that can attest to that in the room. Looking back as a parent, it's probably because of lack of guidance. I started the conversation saying that no one in my family knew anything about football, and when you start to earn money, then people almost can't tell you certain things as well. So yeah, that's what my journey was a little bit in sport.
Before this started, we were talking about your experience at Burnley, where you endured racism, and sometimes we hear about racism from opposing teams, but you actually experienced it from your teammates as well. Would you share some of that with us?
Yeah, it's difficult to try and find a starting place, because as you grow older, you realise, and I'm sure this will be the same for Hope and Aaron, but I don't want to speak for them. As you get older, you realise some things that I said were and how inappropriate they was, and you remember, I guess, how you felt and or just having to laugh and go along with it. But I think if anyone knows Burnley, 15 years ago, 18 years ago, it's one of those small-minded towns, and a lot of the players were from Burnley, and it kind of started during a 6-week trial. I was 15, about 100 kilos, very fast, very strong, and very physical. And during training, that wasn't always very enjoyable for some people. So yeah, I remember, I mean, do I need to sort of use the terms or just give you? Okay. So I remember in one instance, I remember after training, walking back to the changing room, and yeah, I was on a high because I had a great session, but I was walking behind my teammates, and yeah, I can still remember hearing them say, we don't want to, next session, don't pass to that big black X, Y, and Z. He's a X, Y, and Z, and I don't really want to sort of repeat it. But I at the time, I wasn't kind of sure, and it ruminated with me for a week or two, and I remember saying to my dad, like, you know, I actually don't want to play football anymore. So I just didn't know how to deal with it. But my dad, being my dad, he was like, "What do you mean?" And I couldn't tell him because I know what would happen after that, and the sort of scene that would have been created. So I kind of had to firm it and hold it a little bit. And that was kind of my first experience of the team, teammates envying me, not, you know, simply because of the colour of my skin. And then, like, you know, there's always comments and jokes and whatever that I had to put up with.
Was your academy aware? Was Burnley aware? And did they do, I mean, we don't want to make it about Burnley, basically, because what I want to ask is, do you feel, and Aaron and Hope, if you could jump in, that the clubs are taking care of young black men specifically when it comes to situations like these? Do you think that there's a level of care? At that point, did anyone advocate for you, or did you just have to deal with it? Did you tell anyone besides your dad?
No, because like, again, I don't know what it was like for Hope and Aaron, but, you know, oftentimes like, coaches might instigate a joke about like not being able to see your leggings while you're wearing black leggings or whatever, and the rest of the players would laugh. And I think at the time, you know, I might have laughed myself, but as an older man, I realised how inappropriate those comments were. But no, and the sad thing about it is, you know, I think it's about maybe 10 years after leaving, about 8 years after leaving football, my youngest brother, Remis, was involved in a bit of a, let's call it an argument on his team bus. This time he was at Blackburn, and Remis said something, and one of the lads started taking a mick out of the colour of his skin, and which I was livid about. So I went into the club and we sat down, we spoke, and the coaches were just very, very blasé. It wasn't a big issue to them. And in fact, they actually suggested that maybe Remis should take the rest of the season off and go and play Sunday League football, which till this day it still angers me, because why I'm getting there. Why is it I didn't have the mindset I have now when I was 25, when I was 18, and I wish to God that I did, because I would have been able to deal with those situations a little bit better. But yeah, in terms of answering your question, I think it's probably got better over time. But most of my coaches, in fact, all of my coaches, I would say, probably never saw an issue with it. They probably always saw racism as like a bit of a laugh and a joke.
Hope or Aaron, have you experienced anything in your career?
Yeah, racism is prevalent in the UK, it's prevalent in Europe, it's prevalent in football. I never experienced anything internally to the level that Raf's just discussed at Manchester United during my time. I think there's often situations and conversations that are brushed aside as or classed as banter within a football dressing room, and growing up in football, which is what we all did, you become accustomed to it. So things that you potentially wouldn't accept at school or in another environment, you are a little bit less likely to react in a sporting environment, because ultimately you're trying to forge a career. What we have to remember is, especially in our time, is that there wasn't a lot of coaches that looked like us, thought like us, or came from where we come from. So for me or for Raf in his situation to go to his coach and explain how he's feeling, when that individual has never felt that, or potentially never even dealt with it, or hasn't had the level of training to deal with that situation and scenario, is difficult. And football's improved a lot in the last 15 to 20 years, but when we was kids coming through, there was no HR system, there was no person of interest to talk to, where it was a safe environment, and ultimately you probably feared being judged by your coach for maybe, and it's going to sound stupid, but maybe not being a strong enough character, and you would worry that that would affect you getting picked on a Saturday, which is not ideal, but that's probably the truth of the scenario. So in terms of what Raph spoke about, I guess I was lucky because it didn't happen in my team internally, but there was lots of issues that are moments where it would be pushed under the carpet as banter, but a lot of the racist situations that I found myself in came on international away trips, and there was a lot of those when we were in countries like Spain or Argentina representing the club, and the club were aware of it, but sometimes it's on the competition or the people that have hosted the event to deal with it, and ultimately they would be Spanish or Argentinian or Italian, to just use 3 examples. So I think it's difficult. Would I have liked more to have been done at the time? Yes. Do I think more could be done now? 100%. But there wasn't really a focal point or anybody that you could talk to that was outside of your team or your bubble that you could confide in. And had there have been that individual, I don't know if they would have been able to deal with the situation anyway due to experience.
Touching on what the boys have said, I definitely didn't, I can't imagine what that was like for you, Raph, to go to deal with that with players that, are potentially on your team. That's another level. But as Aaron said, when we were coming through, there was not many people who looked like us in that environment. So if anything like that happened, any of those jokes, you kind of had to get on with it and brush it under the carpet, or, be quite witty and have something to say back. But in terms of, for me, it helped me just build a thick skin, and you wouldn't let anything sort of get to you. And it was difficult because you couldn't speak to the coach because you were worried about just playing, just starting the game, being picked, and you didn't want the coaches to have anything that they might use against you to say, oh, he's not focused or he's weak. So it was difficult, and there were moments where, little jokes and little things you had to sort of take on the chin and sort of keep your head up and just keep going. But I think things have changed. I guess there's a lot more people who look like us in the game. There's a lot more awareness around racism, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done. The only thing I would say as, anybody, white, black, young, ethnic, is just carry yourself, in a way that doesn't allow anyone to give them that opportunity to label you in any type of way. Because I don't know if you ever felt it in that environment, if you were, say there was 1 or 2 of, your friends or people like you sat in a group at the back of the bus or anything like that, you might feel a type of way, like you can't be yourself, which some other people might never experience. They can just be whoever they want to be and get on with it, but you're always conscious of, I don't want to be late, I don't want to be dressed funny, So these are things that we have to think about. We shouldn't have to think about them, but just to save any issues or anything, just carry yourself in a certain way, and it might help in those situations. But again, it's something that you shouldn't even have to think about, really. I think they are trying to do certain things in football to combat racism. I know there's a lot of stuff on social media at the moment with players getting abused and things happening. You'd like to see more done. You'd like to see more protocols and more pathways and more support for players, because as Raph said, and Aaron said, some people will never ever know what it's like to be on the other end of racism, to feel it, to be called certain things. So they'll have no clue of what you're trying to tell them. But the more we try and explain, the more we don't brush it under the carpet, the more you put your hand up and say that's wrong, or someone makes a joke and you say no, you can't make that joke. is when people might start to get it. So don't ever stop, you know, being that way, basically.
For those who may watch it later on YouTube, and for those of us here now, what was that like? Because all of those years there, and then, of course, as you progress, you feel like, you know, you're getting closer to becoming a pro baller, and then you were released. How was that for you, especially mentally? Or did it impact you?
It was definitely a knock. It did impact me, and you wonder, you know, what do I do next, or where do I go from here? Because, as I say, from 8 years old, that was all I knew. I'd been at Everton, I'd been told to go here, wear this. You know, my life was kind of set out for me in a way. So when, you know, I spoke to the manager at the time, which was David Moyes, he said, you know, son, sorry, you know, we're thinking about letting you go. We could give you an extra year, but we don't think it's right for you. We think you need to go out and find your level, get some more experience under your belt. So I sort of took it as a challenge. I was going into the unknown because, as I say, I was at Everton, I was living in a bubble. I didn't know much about any other teams in the lower divisions. So it was a big challenge, and it was a big sort of wake-up call. But as I said, I didn't take it to heart too much, because I knew the level that was required at Everton at the time, and there were some great players there. So I just took it upon myself to say, look, this is the level, this is what I need to work on, let's get to work, basically. Fortunately for me, one of the coaches there had put a good word out to a few clubs, and I got a club quite quick. It was a lower division club, but it gave me a platform to say, you know, go again, and a place to go back to work. So, lucky for me, within 18 months, I managed to get back to that Premier League level by a transfer. So what I'd say in that situation is don't get too down on yourself. See it as an opportunity to grow. See it as an opportunity to find your feet and prove yourself, is what I'd say.
So when I was doing the research, basically it was a group of friends, and a security guy ends up getting killed. But one of the things that stood out in the article was that someone spoke about you and said that basically you were a good kid, but you were just with the wrong company. And when we talked about it last night, you were saying about, you know, the loyalty in Bermuda, what we would say to your boys, right? Again, that why did you sometimes, or did you struggle to separate? Because you were on a different trajectory, and you had a lot more to lose.
Yeah. What's your question? What are you asking me?
Why was it hard to separate?
Well, I think, I was so complex. I was never, although I'm born and raised in Longsight, and you know, and the things that come with that in terms of like some of the associations you can make. But I was never a bad kid, in my opinion. And I never understood the whole gang violence thing. I was always kind of like away from it, on the outside of it. But I had friends, obviously. And I think on that night in particular, the altercation started with myself and the doorman, which then got out of hand, and then they ended up beating up someone that came with me, and I felt really bad because I was fine. I didn't get into a fight or anything like that. So, especially after going to an all-boys school in Burns, you have your little cliques, and you know what it means to like be there for your friends. But I just didn't have the foresight to read the situation, to know what was coming. I thought I was being a loyal friend, helping someone get from A to B. But little did I know there was a plan at the end of B.
Did the club support you in any way once you did your time?
No, they didn't. But then again, like, you know, when you heard the charges of murder and attempted murder, lots of people want to disassociate. You know, I had some real good friends in the team I was playing with that I've not spoke to since then. I think that the incident happened on a Saturday. I went to see a solicitor on the Sunday. I called my coaches on this Sunday evening. The first coach was like, well, I was saying to him, look, I can't come into training tomorrow because this has happened. And his response was, well, you shouldn't have been out in the first place, type of thing. So I put the phone down. And then I called the gaffer, and he was a little bit more empathetic, let's say, but it was still along the same lines. And then, you know, I got a letter whilst I was in prison saying, obviously, they're releasing me from the football club, etc. So, yeah, I don't.
Did you, once you were released, did you play football after that, or was that like the end of your career?
Yeah, I tried to. I tried to get in contact with all those agents that promised me the world. You know, age 16, like, agents were literally throwing the business cards over the sideline at me for me to sign with them. But I've not had a return call yet. And I found it really difficult. And I sort of did this circuit on this. I sort of did this semi-pro circuit. I didn't come out of prison in the best of shapes physically. I kind of resided to the fact that I was never going to get out, to be honest with you, or I wasn't going to get out anytime soon. So I had to put a lot of work in to try and get into the best shape possible to play. But then I found that the clubs I was going to, they just had like different standards than I was used to. You know, like going to McDonald's before a game and just stuff that I'm not used to. And I struggled in that environment, in the semi-pro environment. So yeah, I ended up calling it a day. I was like maybe 24, 25, and not look back.
Okay. Aaron, you then went on after your academy run. You then went on to play for Cardiff, and you said you didn't play there for too long as things didn't go as expected. Did that ever deter you from thinking that you would progress in football, or did you just see it as a stepping stone to just move on?
It's a great question again. Yeah, I went to Cardiff after I got released by Man United. I'd been top scorer in the reserves that season, so my credibility was quite high. I'd signed for Cardiff and been promised that I would be in and around the first team squad, and they were in the Championship at the time, so it was a decent move. And you go there with the expectation that you've been at Manchester United and the best team probably in the world at the time, and it's going to happen. You're going to play. I got a call from my agent, and he just basically said that they had signed, like, had I seen the news? And I was like, no, because I wasn't watching Sky Sports News and there was no social media. So he was like, well, they've signed Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank and Robbie Fowler. And being a little bit impetuous or having an elevated opinion of myself, I didn't want to be sixth choice striker at Cardiff. And I just thought that the game would, I'd find something else in the game. So I stayed around for a little bit, but if I'm being totally honest and transparent, my attitude wasn't correct in training, and I'd lost a little bit of interest, and it's difficult to be in Wales if you've ever been. So that all contributed to me leaving the contract earlier. You always feel that you'll find your way in the game, but the game, one, it is the game, and two, it's very unforgiving. So we went on a few trials in certain clubs, and again did well. But the attributing message that I got quite often was that because I hadn't had enough first team experience, they didn't really think that I was good enough or mindful enough or ready to hang my hat on, or for them to hang their hat on me. Part of my passion for the game died when I left Manchester United, and that's just being honest, because I'm from here, we're playing for the biggest club in the world, and when you leave, and Hope will be able to tell you that when you leave and you drop down the levels, it's a totally different game from the Premier League and the things that you've become accustomed to as a youngster. Hope called it a bubble. You're almost pampered a little bit, and your expectations are not reality, and the only reason why people are unhappy is when your expectations don't meet reality, and that's what I found when I dropped down the levels.
Before you pass it on to Hope, at what point for you then, because I hear you say, your enthusiasm was waning, at what point was it okay for you to take the decision to walk away from football in the sense of a player?
Well, I played semi-pro till just before COVID, so I didn't physically stop playing football till I was probably 31, and that was due to business commitments. But from the full-time professional game where I'm training every single day, it was probably 24, 25. It was because I knew that my earning potential wasn't going to meet my previous expectations. I wasn't going to be able to retire. I'm 36 now, so I wasn't going to be able to retire and not do anything else. And I looked at it and thought, well, I'm probably taking somebody's position that loves the game more than me. And I didn't think that was the right thing to do. And I didn't want to hang on for something that I wasn't 100% committed to.
And Hope, you just finished playing about 18 months ago. Pardon? Oh. Hope, you just finished playing about 18 months ago. What do you say to people who think that the only career that you can have is at the Premier level? Because you played, forgive me, I don't know what's the league, but you played professionally until recently. So what do you say to them who think that unless you're playing Premier, you can't have a career in football?
Yeah, so I played at every level in the English game. Obviously started at Everton Premier League, went down to League 2, went back to the Premier League, and then played, I think, 7 years in the Championship, and then League 1 and then League 2 again. So I played at every level, and there's definitely, you can make a career, League 1, League 2, even National League, semi-pro like yourself, if you've got aspirations to blend the football with another career, it's probably a good route as well, semi-professional. But there's definitely, a career to be had out of the Premier League for sure, especially in this day and age. Championship level, League 1 level is still a really high level. The game's evolved to such a high standard now that the Premier League is, you have to be some player to play at that level and maintain it. So definitely within the English game, Championship, League 1, League 2 are still very good levels to play at.
Now, each of you are now successful businessmen in different ways. So since you have the mic, Hope, tell us what you do now.
So at the moment, currently, I have a plant-based healthy eatery in South Manchester. Been doing it for 2 years, sort of post-COVID. So it's my full-time work. I don't play football anymore. Like Aaron said, I kind of lost that passion for it. Again, didn't see the earning potential as it once was. So I just figured, it's something that I'm passionate about. I want to put my time into it. So I went full force with that, and it's gone really well so far. It's a lot of hard work. The football world is definitely very different to the real world, I can say, in the way you communicate, the way you deal with situations. So there's a lot of learning that had to be done. But it's a challenge, just like football was a challenge. There's a lot of transferable skills that you can take from football, take from those scenarios, take from things that you learn from your coaches, that training every day, that discipline, that dedication that you can apply to different areas of life for sure.
And Aaron, you own a life insurance company. How did you get into that?
Fell into it, really. A good friend of mine is a public speaker, and he spoke at an event 5 years ago, and obviously blew them away with his talk. They wanted to build a franchise in Manchester, and he's a very busy man, and I was almost the first port of call when he decided that he wanted to look at this opportunity. So I trusted his viewpoint, and I was ready for an opportunity with where I was at in life. So yeah, we took it on. It's gone a lot better than we expected. We are making a reasonable impact in the industry, and we're taking it on from there. But it wasn't something that I expected to be doing 5-6 years ago. It was ultimately about taking an opportunity and looking at the transitional skills and the network that you've built up through football and other communications, in order to maximise my potential within this industry and sector.
Raph, I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask each of you a question, but Raph, what do you do now?
I own a catering company, and I also have a CIC. Yeah, that's a short answer.
He has a vegan catering company that makes you want to forget about meat. You forgot to say that part.
Yeah.
So I want each of you to answer for me before we open it up to any questions to the audience. But at any look at real quick at your football journey and tell me one thing that you have learned about yourself in your football career.
That question requires time.
Okay, what's one of the greatest lessons that you think you've learned?
I'll try and touch on the South part, but it sounds a bit gimmicky, but sometimes I say it to my staff and they look at me like, what am I talking about? But I tell them to run round the cone. I don't know if you guys understand what I mean by that, but I tell them to go round the cone. So in football, there's always kind of like 2 or 3 type of players that would stop a yard short of the cone, players that would go to the cone, and there's some that's the busy ones that would run right round it. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. So and I guess I've used that philosophy even within business. The effort I put in, sometimes I'm literally, might be 2-3 a.m. in the morning, I'm telling myself I'm running around a cone. It sounds strange, but what I'm saying is that I'm putting the extra effort in, because I know that although I can't see all the other catering companies in Manchester, some of them will be stopping a yard short of a cone. And so it's just football, that's I think the biggest lesson I've learned in football. It's just finding the inches. In terms of what you taught me about myself, I don't know. I'll come back to that. Okay. I'll come back to that.
Yeah, great question. I think what I learned about myself in football is that I am more resilient than you think you are. Yeah, and what my piece of advice to anyone would be, if you are going to make a career in a game, then is that you are more than a footballer. I know that's the box that they're going to try and put you in, but you are a human being. You are somebody's son or daughter. You will end up being someone's mum or dad. So you are more than football. And for me, it doesn't matter whether you leave the game at 16, 20, 37 and you've won the Premier League. If you only see yourself as a footballer, you are not going to be prepared for the real world. So it's important that you understand your core values and what matters to you. The things that matter on the pitch will ultimately matter off the pitch when you're no longer playing, but you are more than a footballer. And I said it before, the game's the game. We all love the game of football, that's why we're here talking about it, but ultimately the game will forget about you very quickly.
Yeah, a common phrase that people, well, a lot of players that I played with was football forgets. You know, as soon as you finish, you're a forgotten man. So it's important you know who you are more than anything. Yeah, the one thing I'd say is delayed gratification. So what you do today, you might not see the results of tomorrow or the day after. But if you're consistent and you come back to the table and you keep putting the work in 6 months, a year's time, 2 years' time, you'll see the results of that. So it's not to expect things too quickly. Just do the work, and you know, with a bit of luck, you know, when the opportunity comes, you know, you're ready to take it. It won't catch you by surprise. Because a few times early in my career, opportunities came, and because I hadn't done the work, I wasn't ready. So, yeah, I'd say, you know, put the work in and do it over a period of time. Don't expect results straight away. Look what you've done over 6 months, a year's time, and no matter what, whether you've reached your goals or you haven't, you know, you'll be better off for it. And like Aaron said, you know, don't see yourself as just a footballer. You're so much more. Sometimes you box yourself in, or you categorise yourself as something. But I've seen players who played at a higher level than me, won trophies, multi-millionaires, whatever they are, but they're empty inside because all they see in themselves is a footballer. So when they're not a footballer anymore, you know, they lose themselves. So it's important that, you know, throughout your journey, whatever level you get to, whatever, you know, amount of games you play, is that you know who you are first and foremost. That's all I'd say.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions that you'd like to put to our panelists?
For young boys in particular, for young black and brown boys, is there anywhere that you would kind of like advise them or signpost them to go if they're kind of like going through any type of racial trauma, basically, within the football team or without, when they're travelling, etc., and or if they leave a club, get dropped, etc., because I work for a youth mental health charity, and we know that mental health in young people has just risen exponentially since 2020. So for me, it's about raising that awareness and being able to candidly have those conversations with any youths that you might see on road and say, well, you know, you can go here or you can speak to that person. So in your experience, knowledge, is there anywhere that young people can go?
I'll answer too as an academy mom.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
Okay. So I'll actually go first as an academy mom right now for the last 6 years, and I would say the answer is no. From the perspective of the club that my son is in, they just seem to brush it under the... They don't acknowledge it like Hope and Aaron was saying, you know, maybe it's they don't know what to do, or maybe people are afraid to address it thinking they'll get benched, but they don't even talk about that type of stuff. And I've advocated for it specifically during Black Lives Matter. That's when it actually became pronounced that there didn't seem to be any resources within the academy that we're in. So
I guess it just depends what level they're at. I'm super fortunate that, you know, I signed my pro contract, and I'm now a member of the PFA, and they've looked after me through various ways and means, whether it's recovery or rehab at St. George's Park, or paying for my education. But if you don't sign your pro contract and you're going the semi-pro route, it's really difficult.
I can only speak for Manchester United, but I know that there's plans in place at the moment for projects to be set up moving forward to help young people that have been released from the football club. And I think that's an initiative that the FA have got going. or coming that needs to be enforced by the start of next season. So if you are in a Premier League club or a Premier League academy, then there will be a support system. How that filters down the football pyramid, I'm not quite sure, because with that comes financial restraints and constraints.
Yeah, I think it's great what you're doing, because it's definitely something that's needed, you know, with young people, especially black and brown, dealing with anything on that note. But yeah, I wouldn't even know where to go for that sort of help, unless you are at a certain level where you have access to the PFA and those sporting bodies. It's definitely highlighted an area that, you know, needs support, needs funding, because, you know, no one should have to deal with those things on their own. So definitely great question, and it's highlighted an area that we need to all collectively sort of put our hands together and find solutions.
That's really saddened me to hear. I expected somebody, but what you're saying is that if you're on a professional level PFA, then you might get something, but after that, there's nothing out there. Is that basically what you're saying? Even though you're saying that United have got an initiative that's coming up.
Yeah. To my knowledge, yeah. But as Aaron touched on, you know, there's, because you mentioned about reaching out to ex-players and whatnot, but then where do they go to implement that support?
I remember watching TV at some long distant time and hearing similar crying out, I would say, like you probably would remember John Barnes and what he had to go through. So to hear this same thing today, do you think it has been worth it, considering your journey of the industry? And two, would you think, considering your journey, that it's worthwhile for any other young person in a reflection of yourself to take on the baton to continue this type of game, knowing that the racism is still quite strong? I know, Hope, you had a lot of positive things to say about it, but I mean...
Is it worth it? I would say absolutely. And I think it's not something that we can shy away from. Look, I've endured racism from teammates and opposing teams since I was 14. I made my debut when I was 17. And every time I went to pick the ball up for a throw-in, all I could hear is the chants from the crowd. And I don't, it's not, Rochdale Stadium is a lot more intimate than perhaps where some of these guys played. So you can hear a lot of what people have to say, and they're almost this close. But I think for what it's gone through that journey, for what it's instilled in me, and who I have become today, I think even if I knew at age 14, or maybe age 16, that I would endure and be in certain situations, I'd probably still take the chance to play football. I mean, age 15, 16, that's all I wanted to do. Teachers were telling me I need to revise. I'm saying, no, I don't need to revise, miss. Like, I'm set, I'm playing football.
Considering now that you've left the industry and that you're all wonderful, aspiring businessmen, got to your point of successful businesses, you've got a wealth of information and background that could possibly help aspiring young black men to move forward with their own careers when they haven't got that support that you had. And to say that if you're at maybe Premier League or whatever, then maybe you've got that. But for younger people who are coming through, it'd be wonderful to see something started, because who better would know it than yourselves?
Yeah, and like I've already thought of domain names. I'm going to speak to Hope and Aaron afterwards. I thought of a website address, wheredowegoe.org, like to help combat this. But I think there probably is things, but it's just outside my scope of like knowledge. But yeah, absolutely. I think it would be good if I had someone who I could lean on. During my time when I was going through those sort of phases, certainly would have helped me.
Hi. I don't think I would change one single thing about football. I'm definitely sat on the panel because of football. I'm definitely sat in the position I am within the business because of football and the transitional skills and the resilience. I think you can teach the things that you learn in a football environment in terms of teamwork, collaboration, communication, leadership, the growth mindset, the growth mentality. There is no other alternative or way of getting that in your younger days. So I wouldn't change that at all. Do I think that we as a community, we as people have to educate our children further? Yes, because as parents, and as individuals, as humans, we all become almost sloppy in our approach. We do it with education and we do it with sport. We think that that's going to take care of our children, and it's our job to raise them and set the standards and allow them to understand that, yes, you are aspiring, but the realisation is that you may not make it, and if you don't, we're still here to support you. We love you because you're great at sport, but also because of who you are. And if that support system is there, then those transitional skills will allow those individuals to be in a greater position, in my opinion, than they would have been without the game. So I don't think for me it would have been an option. I think we live in a world now of distractions. I think that there will be children or young people that play the game for the wrong reasons. But when we was kids, we didn't know how much Ian Wright earned or Andy Cole or what cars they drove or what houses they lived in. So we just played it for the purity of the sport and the fact that we were doing it with our friends and ultimately for me, embodying what happiness was. There is no better feeling than scoring a goal. So as long as you're doing it for the right reasons and you're taking stock of where you are and reflecting during the journey to understand that, again, you're not just a footballer, you're building yourself into a better character and a well-rounded individual, then for me there is no opportunity better than the sporting environment.
Yeah, I definitely champion what Aaron said in terms of no regrets. I just feel that resilience built is second to none, I can go into any room, any dressing room, because dressing rooms are so, intimidating as a young man. You're going into dressing rooms as a 17, 18-year-old with 30, 35 plus guys, you have to, handle yourself and carry yourself a certain way. So I wouldn't take any of that back for sure. But I guess in football, in life, it's all about your support network. It's all about community. In my culture, they say it takes a village to raise a child. So I think it's important to, I know everyone doesn't have access to support like that, but anybody you see or anybody who you might feel, might need some pointing in the right direction, I think it's important as, the black and brown community to not let people fall through the net. We all need a helping hand at some point in our lives. We've all had days and times where we've struggled, but it's important to, offer a helping hand and offer that community to the people around us, because no one else is going to come and do it for us. We can, ask and demand, but ultimately it's a collective and we have to come together, stick together and use the knowledge that we have. The people who've managed to succeed in certain areas, they should be able to give it forward the opposite way and help the next generation coming through. So I think that's the focus that we need to have as a group, as a people, as a community, for sure.
Okay, I'm Carlos Baltazar. I'm from Portugal myself. I played academy football since the age of 6 in Portugal. Then unfortunately I moved to Ireland, but I experienced some racism as well. And I felt like the other players weren't better than me because I knew I could bring him to the game, but for some reason I was on the bench, and that alone, I lost the love for the game after that. So I just went down the wrong path of life and managed to pick myself back up now. But how would you guys feel as a pros, yeah, when you stop getting minutes in a game and then you're on the bench, and obviously does that impact your mental well-being as well? And is there any support? And what would you say to young people? Because right now we've got a cousin that is playing pro and he's not getting enough minutes in a game. So what would be your advice to him?
Great question. It was a conversation I was having recently with my business partner, and we was talking about it. And I think the attitude always was that you were a little bit scared to ask the manager why you wasn't playing. As long as you do that in the right way and you say, well, what can I do to play? I wanna play. What is it that I'm not doing currently? That means I'm not in the team, and what do I need to do to get into the team, and potentially whose place am I going to take? And that level of communication will then bring a level of accountability for yourself, and then ultimately the responsibility lies at your door, because we are all easy to or quick to blame other people or blame an environment or a circumstance or a situation, but there will be a reason why you're not in the team. And as footballers, it's a very lonely, claustrophobic environment. The lads that are playing are on top of the world, and the lads that are not playing feel a little bit left out. And then that's when the overthinking comes, and you start to overcomplicate what is actually a scenario. And it might just be that you've turned up late, or you've missed a chance, or the guy that's playing at the moment is in better form than you are. But if you don't go and ask those questions, you're never going to know, and that overthinking ultimately will probably kill you a little bit.
That's a really great question, because I think ultimately that what you're experiencing and what you're talking about led, after a month, after enough time, it led me through a period of ill discipline, which is when I started to go out more. I started to drink more, because I had the gaffer or whatever shouting and saying I'm laid back, I'm so laid back I'd fall over. But then so Matty Hughes, who was eventually sold to Celtic, was calm, composed. But my calm and composure is described as laser and not being ready, if that makes sense. Or I think I can give you lots of examples where I noticed those differences, but as a player, especially if you're black or brown, if the manager hasn't taken a liking to you for whatever reason, and Aaron's right, it might not necessarily be because you're black or brown, but sometimes it might be because the way you are, they misunderstand. But you can't do what I did, which was perhaps maybe give up, or allow ill discipline to slip to what's the word I'm looking for? To allow, that's the word, not slipping, creeping. Allow you to drop your standards. And you see that, like, even in the professional game. I'm so happy that players like Aaron Wan-Bissaka now are getting some credit for his ability as a football player. But he's gone through, in my opinion, a torrid time of people saying that he's crap and sending him back to Crystal Palace. I don't know what these boys think of him, but I think he's fantastic. But you've not seen anything. You've not seen anything in the news whereby he's falling off. he appears to have gone about his work in a quiet way, and now the appreciation is starting to come back in for him as a football player. Because once you get through all that bluster, if you're still showing up, and you can turn around and say at the end of the season, what position do you play?
I don't play anymore.
What position did you play?
I used to play calm on the wing.
On the wing, yeah. So, like,
I don't even watch football. After that, I stopped watching football. I played from the age of 6.
Yeah. But I think for me, it's like, if even obviously I was the oldest out of my brothers, and my younger brother played for Burnley, Accrington, and Blackburn, and we had these sort of conversations. But then it's about keeping him accountable. And I would ask him, well, how many times have you scored in the last 6 weeks? How many crosses have you put in? And if you're not ticking those boxes, then more than likely the problem is the young boy. We can't get lost in like a feeling of like victimhood. And we have to know that these issues do happen, but that can't be like our first point of call, in my opinion. I think we've got to make sure we're doing all the right things, and twice as hard, twice as better, and then you'll be able to see, in my opinion, where you're at as a young player.
Yeah, to touch on what Raph said, unfortunately, as black and brown people, you know, my parents always said to me, you're going to have to work twice as hard. You're going to have to do twice as much, and it shouldn't even be a conversation that you have to have. You know, other people might not even have to have that conversation, but, you know, it's just a thing. In terms of minutes on the pitch, at every level of football, there's players who are on the bench. Even the best players in the world, Cristiano Ronaldo, he's had time where he's not been picked. So it's something that happens to everybody. It's more about, you know, how you deal with it, what you do next is most important. Because if I bring it back to my career, some of the best moments I had in football were after a period where I wasn't getting picked. So there's a period where I was out the team from September all the way to nearly Christmas. And like Aaron said, I went to the manager and said, look, I've been doing this in training. I'm watching the guy who's playing. He ain't doing that. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing X, Y, Z. And I had the facts to prove it. I had, you know, the training stats, the running stats, and I had video footage of what I'd been doing in training. That's how deep I went with it. So that accountability factor, that, listen, all right, what is it you want me to do? All right, I'm going to go and do it. Prove it for a period of time and say, look, this is what I've done. Give them no excuse, no reason to sort of leave you out of the team. And the time I did that, I went to the manager, spoke to him and said, listen, give me 2 games to prove what I can do. If I don't do the job, you'd never have to play me again, is what I said to him. And I played the 2 games, and then I played every game towards the end of the season, for the rest of the season, and was player of the season in that year. So it's accountability is a factor. Again, you know, you might have a manager who just doesn't like you, or, you know, thinks you're not serious, or whatever that is. You do what you can to prove him wrong. And if you know, if it still doesn't work out, there's other routes and other clubs that you can go to. But if you continue to show that discipline on yourself, that accountability, you'll be better off in the next 6 months where you go next. If you switch off and throw it away and down tools and not put the work in, 6 months down the line, that 6 months where you weren't doing anything, it'll show up again. So it'll make it more hard or more difficult to make the next step. So I think football is it's a very individual game. You have to be selfish, and at the end of the day, it's down to you, basically, how much do you want it. But yeah, as Raph said, you know, try not to have that as at the first thought of your mind, oh, the manager doesn't like me, or it's because of this. Do all that you can, be accountable for a period of time, and then put it in front of him and see what happens.
Let's say they're in academy, but they go into personal problems at home. Let's say parents divorce, that can have a proper impact on how they perform. Is there any kind of support as well, or counselling or anything in academies? Are they aware of these kind of problems?
Good question. I think in the academy settings that there might be. Again, I know when I was at Everton, we had an educational welfare officer who would really look after the players, make sure you had no issues going wrong in school, family issues if you couldn't get to training and stuff. They try and help you in that sense. In the rest of the game, I'm not too sure about that, and things in life, especially at a young age, those sort of things can really affect you. But again, it's that resilience and that how much do you want it. For me, on the football pitch, took me away from any problems that I had for those periods of time. That 90 minutes, you're allowed to sort of escape from those issues, but it's not always the case for everyone. So I'll let you continue on that one.
Yeah, no, I think it's the educational welfare officer certainly at the Premier League level will be the person that you would go to. But sometimes I think that as individuals or as a community, we have to understand that we are at a football club, or your cousin is or your brother is a footballer for the minute, but we have to look at the support network that we have internally, because if that individual wasn't playing football, how would we support him in that case or scenario if it happened when he wasn't a footballer? So we have to look internally and say, well, where's our support network and how can we help the individual, and then utilise the welfare of the football club as an additional bonus, in my opinion. So I think that we'd have to come together and look around, or as uncles or dads or brothers, we'd have to seek advice from our peers or people within our network to enable us to understand how we need to deal with a scenario and situation. We can't just rely on the football club to sort out what is ultimately a domestic problem, and then again highlight that or pinpoint that towards footballing performances, because ultimately we know that how the world is, everybody's got an issue or a problem. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, just be it that footballers have got so much money and they're seen as sort of the icons of our communities. Do you think it's right that us as black people pin so much expectation on them, and be it that they're so young and they come into I don't know, their field, their sport of expertise so young with so much money, that we pin so much expectation on them and expect them to do so much? And do you think they live up to that expectation as well?
I think that's what we do, man. Like, that's what happens in the black community. Like, there's a lot of expectation, not just on football stars, but on everybody. Like, I feel expectation. The guy Talishon who's cooked the food for tonight, I have an expectation to use what I've got to create opportunities for those in my community. Do I think it's right? I think so. Yeah, I mean, but there's a difference between expectation and entitlement, and there's such a fine line. But I think we should. I think we should expect, because look, I've had, and I don't want to say too much or name individuals from Manchester, but I've seen individuals who have attained massive wealth and are now in a different part of the country, or spending £100,000 on a framed shirt at some gala for some other charity that doesn't have anything to do with where they come from, and which I think personally, but then again, it's each to their own. It's their money; they can do what they want. But equally, I think those of us who get to a position, this is a complex thing. Every time I want to say something, there's always the opposite side of it, because like part of me is like understanding that you can't expecting anything from anybody, but also, like, there's a role and a position for you to play. So where do we draw the line and what's important? And I think it just depends. I don't think I'm satisfied with what I've seen. I think way more can be done. I think way more can be done, way more should be done. But I focus on what I can do, and I don't want people talk about like the Turtle Bays or whatever of the world. And I say, my thought process is that I would never complain about places like Turtle Bay, because look how many millionaire businessmen, football players, sports stars, etc., that we have that come out of our community. You mean to tell me that they couldn't put something together? But again, my position is I'm trying to build a table and privilege for those in our own community.
A lot of them don't really live up to that expectation, maybe, and if not, do you think we should be looking elsewhere within our community for that support?
I think as a community we put too much pressure on those individuals because they're good at a sport to come back and change things, and ultimately there's only one Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. It's not for everybody.
Yeah, can I just add that? Just say one thing to that. I think, and I hear what Aaron's saying, but again, like, and I'd love to actually talk to him about this after this panel. But I hear what he's saying. But if you're going to give 20 million to First Year to give out food, etc., that 20 million isn't just of food. It's going into an infrastructure, it's going into an organisation, it's going into thousands of people. And I'm not taking away from that, let's be clear. If you're in a position and you're a Marcus Rashford and you're Raheem Sterling, it's all about the want, because they can buy the information they need. It's the want, it's the remembering of where they come from. And I think, yeah, there's a whole education, that accountability is key, and I would never expect anything from anybody except for myself, which is why I do what I do. But my point is, if they didn't do anything, then there's no expectation. But because I see people doing stuff, then it's like, well, hang on, obviously you know there's value in what you're doing, so find some value here. Can we talk about this after, Aaron?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
If everything would have gone to plan in your career, you would have had a utopian career, you would have maximised your talents, you would have had the right advice and been able to really make the most of your talents, where do you think you would have reached in your careers, and what do you think you would have achieved?
That is an interesting question. You like to think that you would have made it. But I look back from where I am now, and I think that I'd be able to add more value from this position because of lived experience, because of rejection, because of the ability to rebound, because of the social aspects and the people that you come into play with on a day-to-day basis, because you're not in football and you are building and owning a business. So I think my value will be increased because of the rejection and the fact that I didn't make it to the level that I expected as a kid. And a mentor that I had said something that was really profound, and it only got said to me about 6 years ago, was that maybe everything that happened in football was to prepare me to potentially be the best life insurance advisor in the country or in the world, which ultimately I probably was never going to be on a football pitch, with the greatest respect to myself. So I think my value comes from those rejections, from the experiences that I've had, but the understanding that because of my core values and my beliefs, that I can now come back to the community and be a leader because of the substance that I've been able to ascertain over a period of time.
I see myself, I used to visualize at a young age me in a press conference having to explain why I'd rather play for Jamaica than England. Like, so like that was kind of, you know, I was so, I don't know, I think my mindset is obviously developed over time, but my core beliefs and the things I stand for, like, you know, are pretty much still the same. You know, you'd imagine yourself playing football, and getting to, I mean, I don't know, ability-wise, I definitely could have played higher than where I was at. Whether it would have been Premier League, Champions League, it's highly unlikely because the chances are quite small. But I know as a football player, how I envisioned my life was being in a position of, I'm going to say normality within football. I like to think that if I was playing football, I'd use my platform in a way which benefits not just my own community, but what the world as a whole. And again, I was very sure from young I was going to play football till I was 35, and then I was going to start my own businesses, and then when I was 45 I was going to buy houses, and then when I was 46 I was going to retire, basically. That was my plan. I just had to move that plan forward and started that plan at 25. But yeah, to answer your question.
I had a very up and down career. You know, I had real highlights, obviously playing in the Premier League, representing Nigeria internationally. So I guess the only sort of, you know, what I would wish more for was to have done more of that. More games, more Premier League games, more international games, exactly more, yeah. More consistency. What stopped the consistency was a range of different things, you know. I can sit here and blame managers and injuries, but in that game, in any game in life, you need a little bit of luck. And I think at times I lost confidence, whether that was through injuries, whether that was through a manager doubting me, or that was just internally within myself. So to anyone, you know, out there who's pursuing anything, is to have supreme confidence in yourself and belief that you can achieve, you know, what you set out to. So that's the only thing that I'd say, you know, affected me in that way, is knocks the confidence and not quite the dreams and aspirations that you have for yourself, not quite reaching those. But as I stand now, I'm very comfortable with that. I have no regrets. And I just use everything that I've learned over the previous years and apply it moving forward.
So, like, what was your thought process about, like, becoming that successful football player? So, like, for an example, if I see myself being there, I visualize it, that's my thought process, send me around there, and I know, like, I strategize out my plan, how I do it, how I do that, innit? What was yours, innit?
Seconds all that.
So mine was just goal setting, like you said. Obviously, I started in a very high-level environment. So for me, it was always, what do I need to do to stay at that environment? And then when I drop down, what do I need to get to that environment? So for me, it was always setting targets and seeing people or players who I liked, or I thought, yeah, that's the type of person I want to carry myself like, was to model myself on them. So whether that was the way they played, I used to like Steven Gerrard and Patrick Vieira. So that's who I'd say, right, all right, today, in training or whatever, that's who I'm trying to be in my head. So that's the strategy I use to sort of get to the next level, or, you know, get better.
Did you have faith that you would get to whatever level that you wanted to get to?
Of course, you know, I wouldn't have...
110% though.
As I said, mentioned at times, you know, confidence dipped. But especially when I was young, I definitely had that belief that, you know, I'm working this hard, I'm training every day, I'm going to the gym, I'm doing all the extra bits. It wasn't for no reason. I had my goals, and I tried to stay as focused as possible. Obviously, you know, life comes at you in different ways, and there's different situations and scenarios that you have to deal with. But if your main focus is that goal, you know, no matter how much you get knocked, it shouldn't knock you off that vision. Yeah.
Well, thank you, first and foremost, thank you, gentlemen, for this evening. For those of you who came after we did the intro, so we have on the end Hope, Akpan, and then Aaron Burns and Ref Evans. As an academy parent, and I've been in the academy system now going into, I think, my 7th year, I just want to thank you for your insights, because the truth of the matter is that at certain times you don't see many players that look like you as a black and brown boy, and definitely you may see 1 or 2 coaches. So I just appreciate your insight, because it does know, it's a joy to know that there are players out there who are even accessible, because, you know, kids see the Rashfords and the Sterlings and they're inaccessible for the most part. So you gave some really valuable insight today, and I really appreciate, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of the T.A.P project for your honesty, for your frankness. I think we needed, and especially eye-opening, where there is no, or it doesn't appear to be much racial support in the racial spaces. And again, as an academy mom, I can assure you that there is very little, if any. So we identified a gap tonight, right? So also wanted to just send our love and blessings to Fabian Brandy, who is not well. He was supposed to be here this evening, and he's unwell, so we just wanted to send some good vibes to him. But thank you so much for this evening, and thank you to the audience for your questions and your time. And I hope that you've enjoyed this panel as much as we have. So enjoy the food shortly. Thank you.